guys, it's Christy. Just this week I was introduced to the thing that is the knitting podcast on YouTube. It's very much like BookTube, only the folks talk about knitting instead of books. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I am a knitter as well. And I used to listen to podcasts often when I was a new knitter about a decade ago, but they were audio, and so I would listen to them, and I would knit, and I would enjoy myself, but I always kind of felt like it was a little bit frustrating because even though on the podcast page they would link the pattern they were talking to and sometimes even link their Ravelry projects, I never got to see it as they were talking about it, and if I was in the middle of knitting or if I was driving somewhere or something like that, then I just never got to see it. So I think that knitting podcasts on YouTube is a genius idea. And so Felicia of Little Prairie Library did one this week, and she tagged all of her knitting and crocheting fiber working friends to do their own knitting podcast type video. And I thought, well, gosh, I love to knit. In fact, if you asked people who know me to describe me using, two words, they would probably say that I was a reader and that I was a knitter. I mean, those are the two things that I am. Those are the two things that define me the most. I read all the time, and when I'm not reading, I'm knitting. Unless I'm listening to an audiobook, in which case I am reading and knitting. And I carry knitting with me wherever I go, and I knit all the time. Well, up until about a year and a half ago, I knit all the time. Like, I never was not knitting. I would do my homework, and unless I was actually physically typing something, if I was reading my textbook or something like that, doing research, I was knitting while I was doing that. I knit in church because I have a hard time listening to someone give a speech or a sermon without my mind wandering, and I find that if I knit, then my mind doesn't wander. So I talked to my pastor of our old church, and I asked him if I could knit in church, and explained to him why, and he was cool with it. I carry knitting with me at every, in my car, because every time I get stopped at a long light or get stopped by a train, then I'm going to knit. Every time I sit and wait for my kids to get out of school or whatever, I was knitting. And it was just like, that was it. I knit. I couldn't watch TV without knitting. I couldn't do anything without knitting. And I got through so much stuff. Like, I made a plethora of stuff. Socks are my favorite thing to knit, and so I've got 85 pairs of socks in my sock drawer right now, and I've made close to 200 pairs of socks in my lifetime. And I would knit sweaters, and I would knit all this stuff. But the problems that I had were that I knit in Southern California, where the winters are about this long, and so I often had to knit things that were out of cotton or were very lightweight. I knit, sleeveless sweater type things and boleros and that kind of thing so that I wouldn't cover up too much, because I run hot already. So if I tried to cover myself up with wool, unless it was those like 2 weeks in the middle of January where it was actually properly cold, then I would just melt all the time. And so I found that a lot of my knitting stuff just kind of got set aside. I would wear my hand knit socks for the winter months, from like November until January or so, but then it would get too warm, and so I even last winter it was really mild, and I didn't end up wearing my socks. I haven't worn, in fact, I knit several pairs of socks, and they've just sat there for over a year because I wasn't wearing them, and I wasn't wearing my hand knit stuff, and I was feeling really overwhelmed by life in general. My father-in-law got sick and moved in with us, and then he passed away, and then we started packing to move, and then that didn't happen, and then Ron lost his job, and then I got a job, and then he got a job here, and then we moved, and So I found that my knitting mojo had diminished quite a lot, and I went from taking knitting with me wherever I was to leaving the house without my knitting often, and finding that I had just sat and watched TV with my family for an hour and hadn't picked up my knitting at all. And so I was really kind of lamenting, in August and whatnot, the amount of knitting mojo that I had lost, and kind of sad that I just wasn't excited about knitting anymore. And then I moved up here, and within a couple of weeks of moving up here, we had a cold spell, and I realized that, gosh darn it, I needed some warm stuff to wear. So I started pulling out my knitted hats and looking at my knitted sweaters and thinking, oh wow, you know what? This stuff is good, but I need some better stuff. Like, as I said, a lot of my knitted sweaters are not really for keeping one warm. They're more for fashion. And so I was like, well, I need a properly knitted sweater. I need a proper wool, warm, comfy, cozy sweater. And so I started knitting one, and I was like, oh, you know what? I like doing this. This is fun. I missed this so much. And so for the past, month and a half that I've been living here, I've been really enjoying kind of getting back into the knitting groove. And so when Felicia posted her video the other day, I thought, oh yes, I definitely need to become a part of this, because I'm starting to really enjoy my knitting again, and because I don't have any real life knitting friends anymore. I had a great group of people that I spent every Sunday with knitting. That ended a little over a year ago, but for the longest time, for several years, I would spend every Sunday at this one knit shop and knit with these same people and talk, and we lament about, we would talk about what we were knitting and what we were excited about, and what yarn we liked and what designers we liked. And then that yarn shop closed, and that was right around the time when my knitting mojo started to die. And so now I am here in Colorado, and I haven't gone to any of the knit stores yet, but I expect to, and I know that when I do, I will probably find a new knitting group, and it'll be great. But I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was, not the same as my first knitting group. Your first one's always special. But I can still talk to my internet friends about my knitting, just like I talk to my internet friends about my books, because my internet friends are the ones that get me, right? They're the ones who understand, the ones who identify with me. So I'm going to talk about my knitting. I don't know how often I'm going to do this. This probably won't be a weekly thing, especially not with the speed at which I'm knitting, or the lack of speed at which I'm knitting. But I will do this periodically, and if you're not interested in knitting or crocheting or any kind of yarny craft stuff, then feel free to completely ignore these videos. My channel will still be primarily about books. I still read more than I knit, and I will probably continue to read more than I knit, just simply because I can read faster than I can knit. But anyway, if you are interested in continuing to watch this video, then please join me as we talk about knitting. So, what I have seen from the knitting podcasts that I have watched is folks talk about what they are currently working on, and then what they're planning on working on, yarn that they've come in contact with, and stuff like that. So I'm going to basically go over the 3 projects that I have on the needles right now, and one of them is the current sweater project that I mentioned earlier, and then 2 are some really old whips. If you're not familiar with the terminology, whips is works in progress. They're things that you are making. If they go beyond a certain amount of time before you finish them, then they can become UFOs. That normally means that you have stopped actively working on them. And so they are now considered unfinished objects, UFOs. And one of my projects is technically a UFO because I haven't worked on it in a very long time. But let me stop rambling and just get into it. The sweater project that I've been working on is Rustique, which is a pattern by Glenna C. I've made another sweater by her years ago, and I really enjoy her patterns. So, and this yarn, I wanted a good, strong, cable-y sweater. I love making cables. I love the looks of cables. So I had this yarn, and I really wanted to make cables out of it, something really cable strong. So I picked Rustique, and the yarn is a tweed yarn. So it works perfectly with these cables. And here is the back that I've been working on. You can see a really good strong cable panel here, which I really love, and then these lighter cables along the side. I am just about halfway through the back. I've got to knit to 18 inches. Yeah, I got to knit 18 inches, and then I can start the armhole shaping. I love these kind of cable patterns because it looks really intricate, but it's really intuitive. So I don't even have to look at the chart anymore. I know where the cables are going, and I cable without a cabling needle, so cabling is really fast for me comparatively, compared to what it is when you cable with a cable needle. And I would really strongly recommend anybody who cables to try it without a cabling needle. I mean, it's great to have that little extra tool, and it makes it look really cool what you're doing, but it takes a whole lot longer, and it's unnecessary, really, especially when you have yarn like this, which kind of is it sticks to itself pretty well, so you don't have to worry about your stitches coming loose. I have already knit both sleeves, so those are done, and they are blocked, which is why they look so big. And I am just waiting for to finish, the rest of the bits, and then I will sew everything together. I don't normally knit sweaters in pieces. I tend to really like the top-down raglan, mostly because I like the fact that it looks like a sweater so quickly and that you can try it on as you go. I also really like the fact that there's no sewing involved in a raglan. But this sweater is meant to have, positive ease. It's meant to be loose and kind of be worn over, and it's snuggly and cozy, and that's exactly what I want. I want something that's going to be just like I'm going to be able to throw it on over my clothes as I go to take the kids to school, or, sit on the porch and drink some tea and snuggle up in my sweater. So that's what this is for, and that is exactly what it seems to be turning out to be, which is good. The yarn that I'm using is Debbie Bliss Donegal Luxury Tweed. I'm not sure if this yarn is still on the market. It was something that I had gotten years and years and years ago, and I have lots of it. I've gone through 6 skeins so far with the sweater, and then I have 3.5 skeins left here, and then I have a whole bag of 10 full skeins over there. So I should have more than enough to make this sweater. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with the rest of it. I may try to destash it on Ravelry, or I may try to make something else out of it. The yarn is, because it's kind of rustic and tweedy, it's not really, next to the skin soft, so it's not something I would probably make a hat out of or a scarf. So I don't know yet. I have my sweater project in this really great bucket bag, which is sewn by a friend on Ravelry. If she has a shop, I will link it down below. But it's got this owl material inside, and it is perfect for a sweater project. It stands up on its own, and I just put everything inside, and it sits next to me on the couch, and it's just the greatest bag. You can see it looks a little worn down because I use it all the time. And the next project I have is one that has been going for a very long time. In fact, I think I started it in like 2011, but it's a big blanket, and so that it makes sense when you see it, why it is taking me so long. I have it in this GrittyKnits.com hexagonal bag, which again will make sense when you see what the project is. And you have to excuse the fact that the bag is so dirty, but I carry it with me everywhere, and this project bag has been used since 2011, and it has gone all over the place with me. So it's it's inevitable that it's going to get a little dirty. I should probably take the stuff out of it and wash it, but let's be honest, I'm lazy. So this is a blanket that is made out of sock yarn, which is pretty much insane on its own, because who would want to make a blanket out of sock yarn? But because blankets are big and sock yarn is small. But it's such a great pattern, and it's such a great blanket, and I saw it and I was like, yes, I need to be a part of that. The pattern is called the Beekeepers quilt, and it's by Tiny Owl Knits, and I will link all the patterns that I refer to down below to the Ravelry pattern page. And you take sock minis, which are about 5 grams, and I have a bunch that I keep in the bag. And then you make these little hexagons out of them. And the original pattern here. And you make these little hexagons out of them. And the original pattern calls for you to take these little hexagons and stuff them with, some polyfill. But after I made a handful of them, I discovered that I didn't really like the stuffed hexapuffs. They were called, and so I made hexaflats, and I took the stuffing out of the ones that I had made, and I just leave them flat. And then I was just going to make a bunch, and I originally was going to make it to fit my queen size bed, so I needed about 1,000. And I got close to 200, and I was aching to put them together, so I started piecing them together, and this is what I have come up with so far. So you can see it's not really big enough to be a lap blanket. I guess it could be a shawl, almost, if you were really desperate. But right now I have it on the back of my couch. It just basically sits there as kind of like a runner. And I'm just going to keep knitting, flats until I get it big enough to be a proper lap blanket. So I'm no longer making 1,000, but I have a whole Rubbermaid tub filled with sock minis, and so I want to use them up. And so it's just one of those things that's kind of ongoing. As I said, I work on it at church, and I work on it when I'm waiting for my kids to get out of school. So I knit, 2 to 5 of these hexagons every week, give or take. And when I have another, 50 to 75, I'll probably start sewing more on here. I haven't sewn on in quite a long time. But it's a good mindless project, and I like it quite a lot for just that. I don't have to carry around a pattern. I don't have to think about it. It's really, really easy. And then the last one that I have is technically a UFO, because I started it, I think I started it in 2012. Yeah, I started it in October of 2012, so it's officially 4 years old. And at the time, I was really into Colorwork, and I was doing a lot of CALs, knit-alongs, and I had knit several Colorwork hats and Colorwork socks, Fair Isle, and I got into this sock, and I was really making great progress, and then I just lost the desire to make Colorwork socks, and I set it aside for a little bit, and that little bit of setting aside lasted forever. So I have picked it up once or twice over the past 4 years, knit a couple of rows, and then put it back down again. I really tried, which was probably a dumb idea because my knitting mojo was gone, but I really tried to pick it up before I moved out here. I left it. It was one of the few projects that I didn't pack. And was going to bring with me, and I was like, why did I do this? I have hardly any desire to knit whatsoever, and what desire I do have to knit is to knit simple things that aren't going to cause me added stress. So why am I working on this? Why am I trying to work on this Colorwork sock? The pattern is Fire Weaves by Yvette Noel, and I have to say, she publishes stuff under Rose Hiver Designs. I have to say, she is a phenomenal colorwork sock designer. If you're interested in knitting colorwork socks, Cristi-Lael socks, but you're concerned because a lot of people worry about their tension because you're carrying that extra yarn, colorwork tends to not be as giving as flexible as regular knitting, and so a lot of people end up knitting these socks and then find that they can't get their feet in because they don't stretch the way regular knit socks do. I would really recommend that you try one of her designs because she does give great insight into how to make sure that the sock fits, and she makes sure that the gusset of the heel is really good and well-fitting. If you follow me on Instagram, you saw the socks that I posted recently that were green and multicolored, the Cristi-Lael socks, and I was talking about how much I enjoyed the fact that I could finally wear them here. Those are also her design, and are the best fitting socks like I have. Seriously, I love those socks so much. So anyway, here it is inside out. I knit my colorwork inside out when I'm knitting in the round because I find that it helps with the fit a little bit. Having that that yarn that is being carried along on the outside instead of on the inside, it doesn't cut the corner when you're going around. And you'll notice that I knit in using circular needles. All of my needles are circular needles. I don't have any straights, and I don't have any double points. I do all magic loop, and I do everything in the round that I can, and yeah. So anyway, let me put this right side in. So here is the front of the sock, and the side, and then the back. And then you can see the little heel is solid, and then there's the bottom. So this fire weave design just continues all the way down the front. And then the bottom, I don't know if you can see that, it has a really cool intricate design. And I just need to finish this one sock at least, and then go on and knit the second one. I'm kind of frustrated at the fact that I don't have these finished, because these would be great socks to wear right now. We're supposed to have our first snowfall tomorrow, so I'm really excited about that. The yarn that I am using is one of my favorites for solid colors. It is hazelnut yarn, the artesian sock, and I have it in this neon green is electrolyte, and the red, oh yeah, and the red is vamp, which I have to say is like one of the most beautiful burgundy reds. I just absolutely love it. So they go really well together. It's a perfect contrast for Cristi-Lael. You want to make sure that your colors are really opposite spectrum of each other so that they stand out really well. And yeah, I'm hoping that maybe once I finish my sweater, I can get back into this and get it finished. It's really been hanging over my head for a very long time, and I hate that feeling. I have it in this Alice in Wonderland bag, this little, like, I don't know what you call it, and it's by Mama Charisse, but I don't know if she's still doing this. You'll notice that a lot of the things that I have, you know, bags and whatnot, I've had for a very long time, and so a lot of people that made them don't sew anymore, don't sell their sewing anymore. So if I find that she still has a shop, then I will link it down below. And you'll also notice that a lot of my knitting bags and knitting accoutrements are Alice themed, because Alice in Wonderland is my favorite story, and I love Alice memorabilia, and so lots of Alice stuff. So yeah, so those are the things that I am currently working on, or should be currently working on. I have only finished one thing since we got here to Colorado, and that is this very basic hat. When I got here, I was really amazed at the fact that there was actually fall here, because we didn't have fall back in California. you know, the leaves were changing and the air was crisper and you could smell fall in the air. And so I decided to pick up this skein of worsted yarn, which is dyed by Oink Pigments, and it's their, oh, it wasn't worsted, I'm sorry, it was DK. It's their Oink DK, and it was, and the colorway was Crunchy Leaves, which I thought was perfect. And I was really, really happy with the pulling effect, this kind of spiral pulling that I got. You know, you try to not get pooling in variegated projects if you can, but if it does pool, then you want it to kind of pool like this, because these big chunks of color kind of look really groovy. And I love the fact that on the band it didn't pool, but then the body of the hat pooled a lot, and yeah. So yeah, this is the hat that I keep in my car for those mornings when I have got to take the kids to school and I have forgotten to put a hat on before I left. We'll probably get a lot more use out of it once we actually get some snow, but yeah. So that's all that I've finished since I got here. You know, I've got other things, of course. I've got socks that I've knit and whatnot, but I'm basically starting this from Colorado. So this is my Colorado knitting podcast, and so I'm only going to show you basically stuff that I have made in Colorado. So the only yarn that I have acquired since I got to Colorado is this gorgeous gradient that I got from Black Trillium. It's the Sublime DK Gradient Kit. And I got 2 kits because I'm hoping to make a sweater out of it. I went back and forth over the colors. They were on sale, and I wasn't sure which ones I wanted to get. They didn't have enough in the colors that I was really excited about, and so I thought, well, what about grays? I like gray a lot. However, after I purchased it, I realized that I had 2 gray sweater quantities in my cedar chest, and so I really should have gone with another color, but this is even prettier than what I have in my cedar chest, so I'll probably keep this one, make a sweater out of it, and then maybe dispose of the other ones at another time. But you can see how wonderfully she does her gradations. I mean, they're just like one shade off. It's gonna make just the most amazing sweater. I haven't picked out a pattern yet. I'm not sure which one I'm gonna go with. I do still have kind of limited yardage, so I can't do something really big unless I purchase like a solid, maybe the darker gray, and then go with that and use that as my main color. But yeah, I'm excited about it. It's really pretty yarn, and it's nice to have new yarn again. I hadn't bought yarn in over 2 years, really. I just... The purchasing of yarn went before the knitting of yarn went. So, anyway, guys, I'm going to probably end this here. And I have already talked for a lot longer than I expected. Thought this was going to be a nice quick video, but it looks like it's going to be a lot longer than that. So I'll try to edit it down as much as I can. You know, leave comments down below if you knit or crochet. I tried to learn crochet before I learned knitting, but I just never could really get into it. Although it's one of those things that I've wanted to teach myself for a while now, and hopefully one of these days I'll get around to it. And yeah, let me know down below what you do fiber artically. Do you knit? Do you crochet? Do you spin? Do you weave? Do you dye? Those are all things that I've got a lot of respect for, but things that I don't really do. I basically am a one-trick pony with my knitting, but I figure I'm really good at knitting, so at least I'm excelling at the one thing that I can do. So anyway, yeah, guys, that's all that I've got. I'm going to stop rambling and say goodbye. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye-bye.